Mark had always been prepared for the unexpected. As a soldier in Earth's military, he had seen and experienced things that few people could imagine. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment he stepped into the royal court of the Zorath Empire. The room was vast, filled with strange, otherworldly decorations that made Mark feel small. The walls were made of dark stone, etched with symbols Mark couldn't understand. Floating lights hovered above, casting eerie shadows across the floor. The air smelled different, here thick with the weight of ancient power. Mark tried to keep his composure as he walked forward. He had been sent here for a simple mission: negotiate peace. The Zorath Empire had been at war with the humans for years, and it was his job to end it. The war had caused countless lives to be lost on both sides, and Mark knew that the stakes could not be higher. This meeting was his chance to bring about the change everyone hoped for. At the far end of the room sat Queen Virelia, the ruler of the Zorath Empire. Her reputation had spread far and wide, and it wasn't just because of her power. People feared her because of the ruthless decisions she had made to protect her people. Mark had been briefed on her, the Queen, who was both feared and respected. Across the galaxy, her eyes were sharp, her demeanor commanding. She was not someone you easily crossed. Mark felt the weight of her gaze as he approached the throne. The Queen didn't stand to greet him. Instead, she remained seated, her posture straight and proud. Her dark purple skin seemed to shimmer under the light, and her long hair, braided with gold threads, cascaded down her back. The quiet power in her presence was undeniable. "You must be the human envoy," she said, her voice smooth and cold. Mark bowed his head slightly, as was customary when meeting royalty. "Yes, Your Majesty. I am Mark, sent to offer peace between our two peoples." The Queen studied him for a moment, her eyes piercing. "Peace," she repeated, her lips curling slightly. "You think that after everything you can just come here and offer peace? As if it's that simple." Mark took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I believe it's the only way forward. The war has already cost too much. There's no more room for violence. We must find another path, Your Majesty." Small smile played at the corners of the Queen's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And what makes you think I would accept your peace proposal?" she asked. Her tone was not mocking, but there was an edge to it that made Mark's stomach tighten at Ed, trying to make sense of her intentions. A sly smile spread across her face. "I offer you more than peace. I offer you a choice, an offer that will bind us together in ways you cannot imagine." Before Mark could respond, the Queen reached out and grabbed him by the collar of his uniform, pulling him forward with surprising strength. His breath caught in his throat as he found himself pinned against the cold, stone wall behind him. Mark's eyes widened in shock, unable to move. He tried to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. The Queen was so close now, her eyes dark and intense. "You want peace, human?" she whispered, her lips barely touching his ear. "Then marry me." Mark froze. He didn't know how to respond. He had come here for peace, not to become part of an alien royal family. His mind raced, but his body remained still under the Queen's grip. How had things gotten so complicated so quickly? The Queen held him for a few more moments, her eyes searching his, as if waiting for him to make a decision. But Mark couldn't move. He had no idea what kind of game she was playing. All he knew was that this was no ordinary negotiation. And this was no ordinary Queen. The Queen finally released her grip, stepping back with a look of amusement. "Think carefully, human," she said softly. "You're either with me or you're against me. Make your choice." Mark's mind was spinning, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the simple peace treaty he had expected. This was something much more dangerous and much more personal. As the Queen turned away, Mark could only stand there, frozen. Trying to make sense of what had just happened, Mark stood there, his heart racing as Queen Virelia's words echoed in his mind. The words were so unexpected, so absurd, that he could hardly comprehend them. He had come here with a simple mission to negotiate peace, but now he was caught in something far more complicated. The Queen's grip had been strong, almost suffocating, but it was the weight of her offer that left him breathless. He took a step back, trying to gather himself. His mind was still spinning. What kind of ruler was she to offer peace in exchange for something so personal, so extreme? He had heard rumors about her ruthlessness, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Queen Virelia turned away from him, her flowing robes sweeping the floor behind her as she walked back to her throne. The air in the room felt heavy with the weight of her words. Mark could still feel the pressure of her fingers on his uniform, as if she were still there, holding him in place. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. "Do not misunderstand me," the queen spoke, her back still to him. "I do not offer this as a mere joke. If you want peace, if you want to end this war, you must prove your commitment. You must prove that you are willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good." Mark's mind raced as he tried to process her words. A marriage? Was she serious? Could this be some kind of test? A game of power? Or was there something more to her proposal? He didn't know. What he did know was that the fate of countless lives rested on this meeting. The war between their people had already lasted far too long, and it had torn apart too many families. Peace was the only way forward, but at what cost? He could feel his hands beginning to shake. He'd always been trained for diplomacy, for talking through difficult situations. But this was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. He had thought he was prepared for anything. But nothing could have prepared him for this queen's strange and dangerous offer. Mark swallowed and took a deep breath, trying to collect himself. He had to respond, but what could he say?
"Your Majesty,"
he began, his voice shaky at first, but then gaining strength. "I did not come here to marry you. I came here to end the war, to bring peace to our people. That is all. This offer is beyond anything I expected." The queen turned her head slightly, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You think you are the first to think that peace is simple?" she asked, her voice cool and commanding. "You think you can simply walk in and ask for peace like it's a simple favor?" She took a step forward, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Human, peace is not a gift. It is a trade. And I require something in returns, something greater than just words, something that binds us together. Mark felt a chill run through him. He had heard stories of rulers who used their power to control others, but this was different. The queen was not just asking for submission. She was asking for something far more personal. She was asking for his life, his future, his very soul. "You have heard of the old customs," the queen continued, her tone becoming softer, almost seductive. "The ancient traditions of the Zorath. Union between rulers is the strongest bond, the greatest symbol of peace. Our people are divided, and only through such a union can we hope to heal the wounds of the past." Mark shook his head. "But I am not one of your people. I am a human. How could a marriage between us solve anything?" he was trying to reason with. Her trying to make sense of her logic? But the queen's resolve was clear. She wasn't interested in negotiations or compromises. She wanted a commitment that was far deeper, far more binding. "Perhaps you do not understand," Queen Virelia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You, a mere human, have been sent here to represent your people. But I hold the power to end this war. I can bring peace, but I need something in return something. That proves your willingness to stand with me." Mark stood there, torn. He had never felt more out of place in his life. The weight of the queen's gaze was almost unbearable, as if she were searching for something in him that he couldn't offer. He had always believed in peace, in the idea that all people, no matter their species, could find common ground. But this was something else entirely. "What if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew it was a dangerous question, but he needed to know what his options were. What would happen if he said no? Could he still fulfill his mission and bring peace, or would it all fall apart? The queen's lips curled into a smile, but it was not a comforting one. "Refuse, and you will leave here empty-handed. The war will continue, and more lives will be lost. Your people will suffer, and you will return to Earth with nothing. Do you think your leaders will thank you for that?" Mark felt a sinking feeling in his chest. The weight of her words was heavy, and he couldn't deny the truth in them. The war had already claimed so many lives. How could he go back and explain to Earth's leaders that he had failed? That he had not done everything in his power to end the conflict? The queen stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "If you want peace, you must sacrifice. If you want the war to end, you must be willing to give everything, even yourself." Mark felt trapped, cornered by the queen's power, by her words. He had come here with the hope of bringing peace, but now he wasn't sure if peace was even possible without paying an unimaginable price. His mind was racing, but for the first time, he realized he was not just negotiating with an alien empire. He was facing a decision that would change everything, the fate of the galaxy, and the future of his people. All rested on the choice he had to make. Could he marry the queen to save millions? Could he trust her to keep her word? More importantly, could he live with the consequences of such a decision? The queen was watching him, waiting, and Mark, frozen in the face of her impossible offer, had no idea what his next words would be. Mark sat alone in his small quarters, staring at the walls of his temporary room in the Zorath Palace. The weight of Queen Varelia's words pressed down on him, suffocating him in a way no battlefield ever had. "Marry me," she had said, her voice low and commanding, as if her words were a decree from a ruler who had never been refused. And now, here he was, trapped in her game, caught between the possibility of peace and the unimaginable cost of agreeing to her offer. He had come to this planet with the hope of negotiating peace, of ending a war that had been raging for far too long. He had been briefed on the queen's reputation, ruthless, powerful, and not easily swayed by diplomacy. But he had never expected this, a marriage proposal. It didn't make sense. It was absurd, yet her presence, her words had a power that was hard to ignore. Mark couldn't help but feel that there was more at play than just an offer for peace. She wanted something deeper, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't understand her. The war between Earth and the Zorath Empire had cost countless lives. Mark had seen the destruction firsthand, had buried soldiers and civilians alike. His mission had always been clear: to end the violence, to stop the bloodshed. But now, this marriage? It was a decision he had never imagined being faced with. It was not just about politics. It was personal. If he agreed to her offer, he would be bound to the Zorath Empire, to their ways, to a life that was not his own. Could he really give up everything he knew for the sake of peace? Mark rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on him. He had always believed in peace, believed that there was always a way to avoid violence. But this felt different. Was it possible that peace could only come through a union like the one the queen had proposed? He couldn't deny that the queen had power, that she could change the course of the war with a single word. But was that power something he could trust? Was her offer genuine? Or was it just another political game, a way to control him? Mark knew he needed to think carefully. One wrong move, one misstep, and the galaxy could be thrown into chaos once again. Aotic. Mark pulled up a secure communication line, hoping that he could get a message through to Earth. He needed guidance. The screen flickered to life, and Mark's heart skipped a beat when he saw the familiar face of Colonel Hayes appear on the screen. "Mark," the colonel said, her voice calm but laced with concern. "You look like you've been through the ringer. What's going on?" Mark sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Colonel, I don't know what to do." The queen, She offered me peace. But it comes with a price. She wants me to marry Hurt, to become part of the Zoroth Empire. Colonel Hayes raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Marry her? That's unexpected? Are you telling me you're considering it? I don't know, Mark admitted, his voice shaky. I came here to end the war, to bring peace. But this, ... this changes everything. I don't know if I can do it. Marrying her, becoming part of their empire, it's not just a political move. It's personal. It would mean giving up everything I know, everything I've fought for.
Colonel?
Hayes was silent for a moment, considering his words. Finally, she spoke. Mark, this is a tough decision. You need to ask yourself, what do you believe in? What kind of peace are you willing to fight for? There's no easy answer, but remember, this peace isn't just about treaties and alliances. It's about trust. You need to trust that whatever you choose, it's the right choice for you and for Earth. Mark nodded, though he didn't feel any clearer. But how do I know it's the right choice? How can I trust her? At him through the screen, her expression serious. You don't, but you have to make a decision, Mark. You can't let fear stop you from doing what's right. Peace comes with sacrifices, and sometimes those sacrifices are harder than anything we ever imagined. Mark looked down, feeling the weight of her words. He was right. He had to make a choice, and it couldn't be based on fear. He had to trust. His instincts trust that peace was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As the communication ended, Mark stood still for a long moment, deep in thought. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. If you want peace, you must sacrifice. But could he really sacrifice everything for peace? That was the question he had to answer. The next morning, Mark found himself walking back into the royal court, where Queen Virelia awaited him. The tension in the air was thick, the silence almost oppressive. Mark had spent the entire night thinking over the decision that now weighed on him. The choice to marry Queen Virelia was no longer just about peace, it was about trust, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to protect the future of his people. As Mark stepped into the grand hall, he noticed the Queen standing at the far end of the room. Her presence was commanding as always. The Zoroth Palace was filled with the distant hum of machinery and the faint sound of the wind blowing through the palace's high windows. But it all seemed to fade into the background as Mark approached the Queen. She was not seated on her throne as usual. Instead, she stood with her back to him, staring out at the vast city below. For a moment, Mark wondered if she had been expecting him. But as he approached, she slowly turned around, her sharp eyes meeting his. There was a strange softness in her gaze, something that Mark hadn't seen before. Was it regret? Was it guilt? Or was it just the weight of her own decisions? You've thought about my offer, Queen Virelia said, her voice carrying a new, quieter tone than before. She didn't ask. It was a statement, one that implied she already knew his answer. Mark nodded, though he was still unsure about his own feelings. I've thought about it, ... A lot, he said. But the more I think, the more I realize that there's something I don't understand. The Queen raised an eyebrow. And what is that? Mark hesitated. Your motivations? Why would you offer peace through marriage? You've led your empire for so long, and yet you're asking me to become part of it. There must be something more to this than just the war. The Queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked slowly toward him, her steps measured and deliberate. Mark stood his ground, though his pulse quickened. There was an intensity to the way she moved, as if every step had purpose. When she reached him, she stopped, just close enough for their conversation to remain private, but not too close for comfort. You're right, she said, her voice low. There's more to this than just the war. The Zoroth Empire has been torn apart by conflict, but that's not the real reason for my offer. She paused and took a deep breath before continuing. Let me tell you a story, human, she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. Many years ago, I was not the queen of the Zoroth Empire. I was a daughter of a king who was too weak to protect us. My family was betrayed by those who were supposed to protect us. My father was killed in his sleep, and my mother was taken from me. The Zoroth Empire became a fractured world of chaos, ruled by warlords and greedy factions. Mark listened carefully, his eyes narrowing. He had heard of the turmoil in the Zoroth Empire, but he had never known the full extent of it. At the age of 16, I was forced to take the throne, the queen continued. I had no choice, had no allies. I was alone, a young girl with a heart full of anger and a mind full of vengeance. I fought for years to unite the empire, to bring it back to its former glory. But every time I thought I had achieved peace, someone would tear it apart. I have fought, bled, and sacrificed everything to keep this empire from falling into ruin. But even after all that, peace has always felt like a distant dream. Mark's heart softened as he listened. He had never considered what had shaped Queen Varelia into the person she was. He had only seen her as a ruler, a powerful leader who demanded respect and fear from everyone around her. But now, he saw her as someone who had suffered, someone who had been forced to make impossible choices at a young age. "You're not the only one who sacrificed," Mark said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his own experiences. "I've seen the same destruction on Earth. War has torn us apart in ways I can't explain. People have lost everything there, homes, their families, and we fight just like you." "But you," he stopped, unsure of what he wanted to say. "You're offering me more than peace, aren't you?" The queen nodded slowly, her eyes locking onto his. "Yes," she said softly. "I am offering you more than peace. I am offering you a chance to help me build something new. I want to break the cycle of violence that has ruled my people for centuries. But to do that, I need someone by my side who understands the cost of peace. Someone who isn't afraid to make the hard choices. That's why I offered you marriage. It's not just a political move. It's a way for us to unite our peoples, our worlds in a way that no treaty could ever accomplish." Mark stood in silence, processing her words. Everything he had thought about about this situation seemed to be shifting in front of him. He had come to this meeting thinking that the queen was simply using him, trying to manipulate him into something he couldn't control. But now he saw the pain in her eyes, the years of struggle and loss that had shaped her into the person standing before him. She wasn't asking for a simple alliance. She was asking for something deeper, a partnership based on trust and shared understanding. "Do this," Mark said, after a long silence. "I don't know if I can marry you to end a war. I don't know if I can give up everything I've known for the sake of peace." The queen smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a small, sad smile, one that spoke of shared loss. "I don't expect you to make that decision lightly," she said softly. "I don't expect you to give up everything for me. What I'm asking is for you to believe in something greater than yourself for the sake of both our peoples." Royal gardens, where flowers Mark had never seen before, bloomed in colors that seemed almost unreal. The air was thick with their sweet fragrance, and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze almost made him forget, if only for a moment, the turmoil inside him. But every time he tried to push the thoughts of Queen Varelia and her offer away, they would return. He kept thinking about her eyes, the way she had looked at him when she spoke of her past, the way her hands had trembled ever so slightly when she spoke of the sacrifices she had made to build her empire. He had seen power in her before, but now he saw something else, a vulnerability that he hadn't expected. It was this vulnerability that kept him up at night. She wasn't just a ruler trying to maintain control over her empire. She was a person who had suffered, who had lost everything. And now she was offering him the chance to help her build something new, something neither of them could have done alone. But what about Earth? Mark couldn't forget the world he had come from, his people, his family, his friends. They had sent him here to end the war, to negotiate peace. Could he really go back and tell them that peace had come at such a high personal cost? Could he explain to them that the price of peace was not just a treaty, but a marriage to the queen of an alien empire? He didn't know if they would understand. He didn't know if he understood. Finally, after what felt like days of wandering, Mark found himself standing outside the queen's chambers once again. He had made up his mind. He knew what he had to do. When he entered, Queen Varelia was standing by the window looking out over the city below. The lights of the Zoroth Empire flickered in the distance, casting an ethereal glow over the scene. She turned as he approached, her expression unreadable. "You've made your decision," she said, her voice calm but laced with something Mark couldn't quite place. Was it hope? Was it fear? "I have," Mark said, his voice steady. "I've thought about it, and I believe you're right. Peace can't come without sacrifice. But it's not just about what I can give. It's about what we can build together." Queen's eyes softened, just for a moment. "You've chosen a difficult path," she said quietly. "But it is the right one. You're not just marrying me. You're marrying an empire, a people, a future. You're taking on a responsibility that few could ever understand." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had come here hoping for a simple solution, a quick end to the war. But now he saw the truth of what she had said. Peace was never simple. It was never easy. It was something that had to be earned, fought for, and at times sacrificed for. "I know the road ahead will be hard," Mark said, "but I believe in what we can do. I believe in the future we can build. Together." Queen took a step forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You understand now?" she said softly. "You understand the cost of peace. And I promise you, Mark, it will not be easy. There will be challenges. There will be opposition, but we are stronger together." Mark felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was the right decision. He had made the choice not just for peace, but for the future, for something greater than himself. "Ready," Mark said, his voice firm. "I'll stand by you, no matter what comes." The Queen smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Then we begin. Together." Over the next few days, Mark found himself thrust into the depths of Zorath politics. The Queen's offer had already begun to stir the hearts and minds of the people, though not all of them were happy with the idea of a human marrying their ruler. There were factions that opposed the union, who saw Mark as an outsider, someone who could never truly understand the Zorath Empire. But there were others, those who saw the potential for change, who believed that this union could bring about a new era for their people. Mark's role wasn't just as a husband-to-be. He was also a diplomat, a bridge between two worlds that had been at war for so long. The Queen's trust in him was growing, and he could see it in the way she spoke to him, in the way she included him in her discussions with advisors, generals, and leaders from across the empire. It was a delicate balance. He was still an outsider. But now he had a seat at the table. He had a voice. As the days passed, Mark grew more confident in his decision. He knew the challenges that lay ahead. He knew the risks. But for the first time in a long time, he felt that peace was within reach, that this was the way forward. It's not just for Earth, but for the Zorath Empire as well. And as he stood beside Queen Virelia during the formal announcement of their union, he knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be hard, but together they would face whatever came next. Peace, after all, was never easy. But it was always worth fighting for. The days following Mark's agreement to marry Queen Virelia were filled with a whirlwind of activity. What had started as a simple mission to bring peace had turned into something much greater, much more personal. Mark was no longer just a soldier from Earth. He was now part of something much larger, something that would shape the future of both his people and the Zorath Empire. The palace had become both a refuge and a battlefield. Every day, Mark found himself balancing between his new role as a diplomat and his personal feelings about the situation. It was clear that the road ahead would not be easy. There were those within the Zorath Empire who opposed his union with the Queen. They viewed him as an outsider, someone who couldn't possibly understand their ways, someone who would never truly belong. But Queen Virelia stood by him. In meetings with her counselors, military leaders, and advisors, she made it clear that their alliance was not just a political move, it was the future. There were murmurs of opposition, but the Queen's authority silenced most of them. Her eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now held a look of determination, and when she spoke, people listened. Mark spent long hours with the Queen, learning the intricacies of Zorath politics and military strategies. She shared her knowledge with him, treating him as an equal, not as a foreigner. It was a strange experience for Mark, who had always been trained to follow orders, not make decisions. But as he listened to the queen, he began to understand her world, her struggles, and the weight she carried on her shoulders. One afternoon, Mark was sitting in a meeting room with the queen, discussing the upcoming peace talks with other alien factions. The room was dimly lit, with large windows that overlooked the city below. Queen Varelia sat across from him, her face serious as she reviewed documents. Mark couldn't help but notice the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the papers. She was a queen, yes, but she was also human in her own way, carrying the burden of her people's expectations. "You seem lost in thought," the queen said, looking up from her papers. "Tell me what's on your mind." Mark hesitated before answering. "I keep thinking about the future, about how different things are now. It's hard to imagine what peace will look like, especially with everything that's happened. I don't think people are ready for change. It's a big leap." "Queen," Varelia smiled softly. "Change is never easy. It's uncomfortable. It forces us to question everything we know. But change is also necessary. Our people are tired of war, tired of fighting, just as your people are. And if we are to survive, we must change, even if it scares us." Mark nodded, understanding her words. He had seen the effects of war on Earth: destruction, heartbreak, families torn apart. And he knew that the same had happened to the Zorath Empire. Their people had suffered in ways that Mark could never fully comprehend. "Do you really think it's possible," he asked quietly, "that we can change everything? That this marriage, this alliance, will actually bring peace?" The queen's expression softened. "I have to believe it's possible," she said, "because without hope, there is nothing. If we cannot believe in a better future, then what are we fighting for?" Mark looked at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. He had always seen her as a strong, unyielding leader, but now he saw the vulnerability behind her strength. She wasn't just a queen. She was a person who had lost much, just like him. And now, they were standing together, trying to build something new, something better. Over the next few weeks, Mark continued to work alongside Queen Varelia. They met with leaders of other alien factions, forging alliances and discussing terms for peace. The negotiations were difficult, and there were many moments when Mark felt like they were on the brink of failure. But through it all, Queen Varelia never wavered. She was steadfast, determined, and unwavering in her belief that peace was possible. And, slowly, Mark began to see it too. The Queen's vision for the future was not a fantasy. It was a real possibility. They had to work together, to trust each other, and to overcome their differences. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was the only way forward. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of negotiations, Mark found himself walking through the palace gardens. The sky was dark, the stars bright overhead. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the rustling of the trees. He walked slowly, lost in thought, trying to make sense of everything that had happened as he wandered. He saw Queen Varelia standing by the edge of a fountain, her back to him. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting a soft glow on her figure. Mark approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her. "Isn't it strange," he said, breaking the silence, "how quickly everything has changed? Just a few months ago, I never imagined I'd be here, standing beside you like this." The queen turned to face him, her expression softening. "The universe works in strange ways, human. You and I were never meant to meet, and yet here we are. And perhaps it is fate, or perhaps it is just the way things must be." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of connection he had never expected. To think that peace was something that could be achieved with just a few words, but now I see that it's something much more complicated. It's about trust. It's about making decisions for the future, even when the road ahead is unclear. The queen stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "That is why I trust you, Mark, because you understand that peace is not just about treaties and speeches. It's about the people. It's about the lives we are trying to protect and the future we are trying to build together." Mark looked at her, his heart full of hope. They had come so far, and yet there was still so much to be done. But for the first time since he had arrived on this alien world, he felt certain of one thing. Together, they could make this work. They could bring peace to their peoples, and in doing so, they could create a future that was brighter than either of them had ever imagined. Together, he said softly, we'll make it work. Together. The days after Mark and Queen Virelia's official union were filled with challenges, but also with hope. The galaxy watched, many with skepticism, others with hope, as the two leaders began to navigate the uncharted waters of their partnership. It was no longer just about peace between Earth and the Zorith Empire. It was about building something new, something that neither of them had ever imagined. Mark had spent countless hours working side by side with the Queen, her leadership guiding him through complex negotiations, and her vision inspiring him to see beyond the immediate hurdles. Though their alliance was still new, the changes that were starting to take place were already beginning to shape the future. The people of the Zorith Empire, though uncertain at first, were beginning to see the potential of this union. The promise of peace was something they hadn't dared to hope for in years. And with Mark's presence at her side, the Queen's resolve seemed stronger than ever. One morning, as Mark stood on the balcony overlooking the vast city, he couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since he had first arrived. The view before him was breathtaking tall buildings of stone and glass, with flying crafts darting through the skies, a testament to the Zorith Empire's strength and history. Yet beneath it all, Mark knew there was something even greater building. Between their people, trust. Do you ever stop and think about how far we've come? Mark asked, as Queen Virelia approached. Her footsteps light against the stone. She smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. Every day, she replied, joining him at the balcony. Sometimes I wonder if we're truly ready for what comes next. But I know that we must move forward. Our people depend on us. Mark looked at her, seeing the weight of leadership in her eyes. He had seen her face so much over the past few months, moments of doubt, moments of strength, and moments of incredible vulnerability. She was a queen, yes, but she was also a person who had been shaped by a lifetime of pain and loss. And yet, through it all, she had fought for peace. She had fought for a future where her people could thrive, and now, together, they had that chance. We've done the hard part, Mark said, his voice calm. We've taken the first step, but the hard work is still ahead of us. The peace we want isn't something we can just talk about, something we have to build, piece by piece. The Queen nodded, her expression serious. You're right, of course, but we've already made great strides. First talks with the other factions went well. There are still those who doubt us, but we are gaining allies every day. Those who doubt will always be there, Mark said. We can't let them stop us. We have something stronger now, trust. The people are beginning to see the potential of what we're building. We just have to keep pushing forward. We're together. They stood in silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. The weight of the responsibility they carried was immense, but Mark could feel a sense of peace beginning to take root. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from simply signing a treaty. It was the kind of peace that came from understanding, from compromise, from the willingness to face difficult truths and make difficult decisions. In the weeks that followed, Mark and Queen Virelia's partnership became stronger, not just in their alliance, but in their personal bond as well. They began to truly understand each other, not just as leaders, but as people. Their conversations became deeper, more personal. They shared stories of their pasts, of their dreams for the future, and the struggles they both faced in trying to change the course of their people's history. It wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges, leaders from rival factions, those who refused to accept their union, and the constant pressure of living up to the expectations of their people. But with each challenge, they became more determined. Mark wasn't just a diplomat now. He was a symbol of the new path they were forging. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, it was one they were both committed to walking together. One evening, as the sun set over the Zorith Empire, Mark and Queen Virelia sat in a quiet room overlooking the vast landscape. The peace talks had just concluded, and though there was still much work to be done, there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. Do you think we're finally on the right path? Mark asked, his voice low as he looked at the horizon. I hope so, the Queen replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. I can't promise that everything will be perfect. There will be more obstacles, more challenges. But I believe that what we're doing matters, and that's enough for now. Mark turned to her, his expression serious. I never imagined this would be my life, he said. I came here thinking I was just going to negotiate a treaty, but now it feels like I'm part of something much bigger. You are, she said, meeting his gaze. We both are. Together we have a chance to change everything, to build something that lasts, something that will bring peace to both of our peoples. But it will take time, and it will take trust. Mark smiled, the weight of the past few months lifting from his shoulders. I trust you, he said simply. The Queen looked at him, her expression softening. And I trust you, Mark, more than I've trusted anyone in a long time. In that moment, Mark realized that peace wasn't just about ending a war. It was about creating something new. It was about building trust, forming alliances, and finding common ground even in the most difficult of circumstances. It was about understanding the past, but not being bound by it. The future was still uncertain. The road ahead was long, and the challenges were far from over. But for the first time, Mark felt that they were on the right path. Together they would face whatever came next. Whatever happened, they would do it side by side.